Hi, Lily. Welcome to Playground Conversations. I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, just as we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are both having this conversation on Kulin country, the unceded lands of the Kulin Nations, and I would like to pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge the great art and storytelling and all the fantastic things that have happened here for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Um, Lily, you're a theatre maker and you're based here in Naarm as well in Melbourne. You're working on a really exciting project right now. Well, excited, I don't know if exciting is the right word. It's a really, it's been exciting for me because it's opened up things. I'm talking way too much already. Lily, how about you introduce us to this project of yours, Death Knell?
Yeah,
And yeah.
sure. Yeah, well, as you said, I'm a theatre maker normally. That's my primary area of practice for all of my career, basically. But, we're in the pandemic still now. We're still in lockdown now in Naarm. And so there's lots of shows that are being cancelled and there's lots of shows that have been cancelled. I've had a number of things cancelled, and everyone in the community has. And Fringe Festival was coming up, and so there was a lot of shows on the horizon that were obviously going to be cancelled. And so I felt this like a creative urgency. I felt a creative urgency. I was going to say within myself, but actually it felt like an external thing. It was like a door in front of you with a sign that says open. And this creative urgency was to start this project called Death Knell, which is it's a project that looks at commemorating and acknowledging the the live performances that are being cancelled or have been cancelled, specifically at the moment for Fringe Festival, but I am planning on talking to other artists who have had shows cancelled since March 2020. Yeah, and so we go through this process. You went through this process, so you know what it's like, where um, I email back and forth with people saying, hey, do you want to do this? These are the dates, I'm available. Then I have a meeting, and I'm very careful in that meeting to not focus too much on outcome, just to chat for as long as seems good, normally about an hour. And we just talk about the show that's been lost. Um, some people I talk a little bit about the experience of the cancellation, but mostly the focus generally is on the show. And I really approach it from my perspective is, or the framing with which I approach it is finding out what the show would have looked like, would have felt like to me as an audience member, like really asking questions that give the show as much life and kind of three-dimensionality as it can for someone who is not actually witnessing it as it's supposed to be. So sometimes that means that I ask people about their practice, like I didn't know what your practice was before. So that was a kind of question that I asked you, because that helps me to kind of contextualize what it might look like or feel like. Other people who I know really well, I don't need to ask so much about practice, and I can go straight into like, what's the narrative, or what characters are you playing, or something like that. And then I normally towards the end I ask people a question along the lines of, if you could describe your show, if it was an entity of some sort, a being, how would you describe it? And people give me really poetic, very varied answers. Even like different creatives from the same show will give me very different answers about the same show. And then at the end of that process, that hour of chatting, then I tell people the services that I offer, which are, there's three different things that I offer people to kind of commemorate their work. There's a death certificate, or they can choose to write an obituary or an ode or something like that. Or there's a cremation where people give me an object, and then I'm going to burn them all. And I haven't gone on to this. That's the second phase. So the first phase is talking to the artist. The second phase will be making all of these objects and doing these rituals. And I plan to start that really soon. Yeah. And then who knows?
That's just beautiful. And I have to say, Lily, as someone who lost a show at Fringe recently and had a conversation with you last week, where you held space for me in this way, this was something that I could never have imagined would be a possibility for me. I have lost shows in the past, not many, but I have lost some. And for this one in particular, I think because of all the general grief from the lockdown and all the, there's just been a series of losses, and the show felt like an easy one to be avoidant about. So for me, since the show got cancelled, I had really been switching it off and not allowing myself space to think about it, not allowing myself space to properly grieve over it. And I was, distracting myself with things that made me laugh or things that made me forget about it for a while. And I was kind of in the denial stage of grief, I feel. And so when I saw that, you were offering these services, I was like, well, it feels like the only place I'm going to be able to process this loss is with another artist, because especially since a lot of what I've been working on was on my own, and I didn't have an artistic team with me this time. And so it's just really easy to not process it, not really go through it, because the rest of the people in my life, they're not working on shows and stuff. So it was incredible how you held space for a show that you weren't working on, but you were so aware of the process of how shows are made, what shows mean to the people who are making them, and what it can mean to lose a show. And how, Lily, how do you find so much space within yourself to hold space for so many grieving artists who have such a range of experiences and meaning that they've assigned to this loss? And how do you manage your own grief and your own heaviness around this, and also provide this space for others?
Yeah. Well, I should say, first of all, that I don't have any kind of counseling training or something. And I did, at the start of this project, I did have a sense of imposter syndrome, or concern about, am I allowed to, do I know what I'm doing? And the answer that I found for myself is, this is something that's needed, and you have the impulse to do it, so do it. And then I think that my way of being in these sessions is influenced by my experience as a clown and as a director, I suppose. And as a collaborator, I work a lot collaboratively, and so there's a lot of being with and holding off on expressing an opinion about things when you work collaboratively with people, because there's a good time for opinions and there's a not useful time. And I really recognized early, going into it, I was like, this is not a space for me to be the star. I'm a performer, I like to be seen, but I was very aware that this is not a place for me to be a performer. This is not a performance piece for me. This is an act of communion between two people, and it's really about me facilitating the other person having space. So I guess as a director, I know about being still and watching and listening. And you listen for certain things as a director, that thing. And so one of the things that I'm listening for, because I don't go into any of the sessions having an idea of what I'm going to ask the people, even the people that I know already, I don't have an idea of what I'm going to ask them. And so I'm listening for what is my next question going to be? I'm very present in the moment, and it's a little bit like improvising in front of an audience. there's a thing of like, oh, what if what if there's a big gap of nothing and I don't know what the next question is, and then I don't get to untangle this piece. And then, you know, clown training is all about being present. The funniness is like it's a symptom of being present. Yeah. And so also I approach this project with this idea of like, of clown, of vulnerability, of presence, of breath. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. I just want to say, firstly, about the imposter syndrome feeling that you had at the start, that I really relate to that, because I'm actually studying counseling at the moment. So I'm in the process of working towards a qualification, but it's a really big feeling to hold space for another person. It's a lot of responsibility, and you do, like, it's so natural to feel, you know, that weight, but at the same time you really nailed it with the, you know, just being present. And because I think especially with grief, it's there's nothing to do but to be present with the person who is, you know, mourning something that they've lost. And I just have to say that I'm really glad that you responded to that instinct and that urge to do it, because you just do it so beautifully. And I've felt myself breathing differently since that session with you. You know, I've felt it, like that sense of avoiding a thing that I wasn't willing to acknowledge before. You know, I've felt my relationship with that show change. I'm feeling a sense of being able to move forward, which is, it's huge. It's huge. It's huge for me, and I'm sure that it's been huge for all the other people that you've been speaking to as well. I do want to ask you more about your clown practice, because I really love that the first thing that you think about with that is the thing of being present, vulnerability, breath, and just being, because a lot of people don't associate clown with those things as much as they associate it with the funny, which, as you said, is kind of a byproduct of being present. So can you tell us more about the clowning training that you've had, the clowning work that you do, and what it means to you?
Yeah, definitely. I love talking about this stuff. So I guess I should tell you maybe a little bit about my training background first. So maybe if I go back all the way to when I was a child and I wanted to be an actor, and I wanted to be like a famous movie actor maybe, or something like that. And then when I was 12, maybe 12 or 11, my dad took me to see this play. It was an adult piece of theatre. Like, there were people running around with enormous phalluses. It was completely bizarre and amazing, and it changed my life. And I was like, that's it. I don't know what that was, but that's what I want. Which, only now talking to you about this do I go, the phalluses. Oh, this is satyrs, which are like these ancient characters from the birth of theatre, Dionysian ritual. Oh, that makes me happy to make that connection. Oh, that makes me very happy. I can't believe I have never realized this before. They run around, you know, in a circle with these huge phalluses. Anyway, so this is, I witnessed a Dionysian ritual, basically, kind of. It was actually, I think it was King Lear, but it was wonderful. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Finish high school, audition for acting school, don't get in. Audition for acting school, don't get in. Audition for acting school, don't get in. Go and do something else for a few years. And then I was like, I'm going to try one more time. I think I was 22, maybe. And so I tried one more time at the National Theatre, which is like the second, not the good one, the second one in Melbourne. And I got in and I was like, oh my God, yes, okay. And then we were in this weird transitional year. They were trying a whole new program with us for some reason. And we were the only year that got this weird year as well. The year after us had a different program. And so our first 6 months, we didn't talk at all. Like, I mean, obviously we talked to each other, but we didn't do any voice classes and we didn't do any text classes. We just did physical theatre, which I'd never heard of. Like, I wanted to be Kate Blanchett. Of course. And one of the classes was Commedia dell'arte with this like gorgeous little Italian dude, Theodore. And I loved it. I just loved it so much. You know, it was really, really technique heavy, which I really enjoyed. I love technique so much. It's something that's not ethereal, you know, like it's a solid thing to cling on to. It's very logical to me to have a lot of technique. So all of my practice now is very technical. So I love this thing. And then I was like Googling Commedia dell'arte Australia, there's nothing. And then I find this like 3-week course in Amsterdam over our summer holiday, like in January. And I was like, I'm going to go. I'd never been overseas by myself before. And so I went to Amsterdam for 3 weeks to randomly do this Commedia dell'arte course. And it was amazing, extremely technical. And there was actually a woman there who I still know now, who is now a clown in Berlin, and we still like message each other and stuff. It's lovely. It was so strange. And then I came back to Melbourne and I kept doing my acting course here, whatever. But I'd heard from these people that I met in Europe about this Lecoq school. I never heard about this before. And this Gaulier school. And they had all like either done something at Gaulier, or Nikki, my friend in Berlin, had done the first year at Lecoq. And so then I started thinking, oh, maybe I should go to one of these schools. But I was so scared because I don't speak French, and it seemed like this big thing to go away for this long time. And I was halfway through this course that, you know, I really wanted to go to acting school, and I was in acting school and I was doing kind of okay. And so I was like, no, I'm gonna see the course out. And so then it wasn't for quite some time. Maybe how many years later, maybe 5 years later or something, this guy in Australia, John Bolton, who he had run a Lecoq style school in the 90s, and some of the people that I was now working with who were physical theatre people as well, they had gone to his school then. And so I thought, well, I'll go to John's school then. And so then I learned clown and I learned Bouffon, but not so much technique. And so I felt really, really lost. Like, oh, I'm so shit. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not funny. This is really hard. It doesn't make any sense. You know, like it was tasks like he would say, who will get up and show us green? And I would get up and I'd be like, and then he would say, no, next.
Oh no.
Horrible experience to go through. I mean, he's a lovely man, but you know, like that kind of training is really tough. This via negativa of like, no, not that, something else, no, not that.
Yeah.
Which is the style of training that you get at Lecoq or Gaulier. And then I had the pleasure of training with this guy, Giovanni Fossetti, who's Italian. I've trained with him a few times now, and he is incredible. He doesn't teach via negativa at all. He teaches all these Lecoq forms, and he was a teacher at Lecoq, and now he has his own school called Helicos in Italy, but he teaches a lot in Australia, New Zealand, America. And so I did a Bouffon course with him, which is the direct descendant of these satyrs, really. Like, he tells this story about the satyrs dancing around, and one of the first exercises that you do is you mime having a big phallus, and it puts you in a wild state, like an elated, or, you know, and then because he's quite he's quite a progressive teacher for someone who comes from this like old European tradition. Then you all have vulvas and you all dance around with vulvas as well, even though maybe the satyrs didn't do that. So I did Bouffon with him, which is, yeah, very physical, and it was so technical. Ha! Mwah, my happy place. And then I did like a week-long clown course with him, and then the next time he came back, he taught a month of clown. And I thought, oh, I've already done a week of clown with him. Like, I don't know. And after that week course, my partner, who's also a clown, and I made a show together, and we'd performed it and toured it. So I'd already done like a full-length red nose clown show, although we didn't wear the noses in that one, but it was technically, it was a red nose clown show. And he said, well, you know, yeah, you can come again and you might learn new things, but he wasn't pushy about it or whatever. I was like, no, I don't want to miss out. So I'll go again. And it was worth it, and I would do it again. And my clown character, who you have seen perform, Jofus, was born in that month-long workshop.
Wow.
And the technique that Giovanni uses is that he gets you to amplify things which are within yourself. So like I have a habit to bend my knees all the time, and I bounce a little bit when I walk. So my clown form does that, but more. It's all an amplification of what's really happening. Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating. I love the journey from, you know, like there's just so many different aspects of it, so many different experiences embedded, and I'm just like, oh, which one can I pick out to ask the next question about, because I want to know so much about so many things. I'm going to start with the last thing you said, which was about amplifying the things that are already there, and I love that you noticed about, you know, the bouncing of your knees, and then just, you know, adding to that, and the clown character Jofus that I have seen as well, which is absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love, because I watched Jofus and the Whale, but I believe there are other shows as well that Jofus are of. So let's just talk about Jofus for a bit. Tell us about Jofus. What is the main, if you had to describe Jofus to an audience who hasn't met Jofus before, how would you describe them?
Very confident. Jofus is a miming clown. And I mostly use masculine pronouns for Jofus, so I will now as well. Like, he's very he believes in himself, and he thinks that he can mime his way out of anything. And also, like, I've made 2 shows with him so far. Both of them have been solo shows, but many characters. And so he creates these worlds. And for me, as the writer, I think, does any of this really exist? Or is this just a child playing? You know how a child can create an entire world. For Jofus, it all absolutely exists. And he is also the master of it. Even when he's in dire trouble, it's the pleasure to be suffering, to play at suffering. Like in the show that you saw, there's a point where Jofus is trapped inside the whale, and he realizes, and the jaw shuts, and he's stuck there, and it's like a prison, and he's like, this is the worst day of my life. But there's a pleasure in that statement, and this kind to play the melodramatic, grandiose suffering. And then also he will immediately be like, I know how to fix this.
I think that was definitely one of the things that I loved so much about Jofus, the I know what to do next, because Jofus was so playful. I think the character of Jofus is one of the most playful characters I have seen in any work ever, and I really enjoyed how smoothly you transitioned from characters, scenes, ideas, emotions. Like you said, even finding himself in so much trouble, and then immediately transitioning to the sense of having control over it, being the master of it, as you said, and knowing the next step, and, you know, continuing on. And I love that playfulness, the playfulness that isn't restricted to lightness or happiness, but the playfulness that expands into all human emotions, into all human experiences. There's a playfulness about that suffering. There's a playfulness about being trapped inside a whale. There's a playfulness about navigating the different parts of the whale's body, all the way down to its poop hole or whatever, wherever Jofus ended up. And you know, how would you say what was your journey of getting to this playfulness, this discovery that you can play with anything and everything, that there's nothing beyond the scope of play?
Yeah. It is a thing that I have really excellent access to when I play in that particular character form. It's like there's something about the form, and when I say form, I mean literally taking on that body shape, this amplified body shape and the stupid voice that he has. When you're strongly in a structure, which for me, in the context of this, is the character form, then there's infinite play, I think. Regardless of whatever structure you like working in as an artist, you know, maybe as a poet, there's a certain structure, or as a musician or whatever. But I think, again, it's this like technique thing, like with that structure and with my years of clown training and all the technique that I know, I can play endlessly in that form. If I have an audience, if I have someone watching me, I can't do it by myself, because it also only lives if there's a person there. And so to devise that show, I had a co-deviser who was my housemate, who's also a clown, and mostly she just watched me and I played for her, and I played for her for hours and hours and hours and hours, and I probably made 20 shows, really. And then we had this horrible problem where I showed it to my director, and she was like, well, it ran at like an hour and a half and you were going too fast. We need to cut this down. And me, the self-indulgent writer, is like, but I don't want to. It's all so good. But she was absolutely right. And so like the final product that you see is also a result of her being like, the audience needs to know what's happening. It can't be too tangential. It, you know, like that, it has to go from one to this. Yeah, people care about narrative. but with that character, you know, like I'll give you an example. For my previous show with Jofus, the way that I made a lot of it was that I would work with my director to find like some structure. So I had this character form, the shape of the body, and I would also know, okay, I'm going to do this bit where Jofus falls out the window. And then I would book gigs. I booked all these gigs, and then I would go, and like I remember one gig, I think I did 15 minutes, and the audience was just going wild. And then I was like, great, now I've got another 15 minutes for my show. You know, like the player is very strong, and it will write. Yeah. And you know, like as a I'm a performer. That's my main thing, that my main practice. Yes, I direct, yes, I write, whatever, but performing is my main practice. It's my love. And why do I do it? Because I love to play. And if you look at children, they can play infinitely, and they want to play all the roles, and they want to play like mummy getting angry, and they want to play you be mean to me. Like I have a 7-year-old, and she was saying, she was trying to get my housemate and my partner to play being mean big girls to her, which is like, why would you want to play that? But they want to play everything.
That's incredible. And I'm just absorbing everything that you're saying here, because it's true. Children want to play at everything. And when we have a structure, we can play at anything within that structure. And it's like, even if we think about video games and things like that, people talk about how you've got really violent video games, and that's a kind of play that people use because it stimulates a part of the brain that is designed to have those instincts, but in a safe space. And so, like with your character Jofus playing with all these things, or with children playing, including, playing with being mean to each other and whatever as part of play, it really is us living all of the human experience, everything that our bodies and our brains are designed for, without the actual danger of actually engaging in actual dangerous practices or dangerous experiences, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And I think that's a part of play, that's an aspect of play that we tend to forget about sometimes, or we tend to, not really emphasize as much. But I'm really loving reflecting on this right now. And I know that I'm going to be thinking about this for the next few days as well. Thinking about my own play practice and thinking about, how much of the full experience of being human do I actually explore through my play. And it's interesting because it fits in quite well with this question list that I have for myself, which is just these 3 questions. It's like, what am I comfortable with right now? What am I obsessing over right now? And what am I avoiding right now? And I really wanted to now think about those 3 questions in terms of play. So thank you. That's really, really good. I especially liked how you said about structure and technique, and how having that framework gives you the freedom to play with anything, and also knowing that you can play when you have an audience, when you have someone watching, and just using that as like, yeah, that's the conditions in which I create my work, that's the conditions in which I play, and using that to your advantage, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I think also I want to say this relates to Jofus specifically, but my pleasure to play generally, and also Lecoq-based technique. There's this thing called mimodynamics, which is like dynamic mime, and it means another word that my teacher Giovanni uses for it is shape-shifting, and it means to embody the dynamic of everything and anything. So when we do neutral mask, which is one of the first things that we learn in Lecoq's pedagogy, we first of all, we learn the elements. So we become water, and then we become like air, and then like rock, and fire. But I think some schools, they run out of time and they're like, okay, that'll do. But actually you can be everything. Like you can be the computer or whatever, and like everything has some kind of cosmic buzz to it. So there is movement in everything, there's a dynamic to everything, and we can play at being everything. Inanimate objects, poetry, a sentimental experience or feeling. All of it is accessible through physical play, and then there's like this weird empathy to, like, how is it to be a mushroom? And then suddenly you have empathy for the mushroom or the ceiling fan or the whatever. And this is like really, it's very embedded in my practice as Jofus, as you've seen. Like, I like to become everything, but it really comes from my training in Bouffon, where these grotesque creatures play at everything, and they play all perspectives as well. They are mocking satirical creatures, and they mock everyone. And Giovanni describes them as 100% empathy, 0% compassion. They can play and feel everything, but they don't care.
That's beautiful. That's such a beautiful distinction.
Yeah.
All empathy, no compassion. That's fantastic. I want to hear more about this. How, do you find that principle going into your characters as well? I imagine that must make you so neutral when you're exploring a scene, or even when you're talking about, for example, Jofus having his great dilemmas and his great struggles, and then coming up with the aha, I know what to do next moment. Like, is that sort of what's happening there as well with the all empathy, no compassion kind of?
Well, the difference between clown and Bouffon, I think, is the Bouffon attacks. Like it's a very political form. They point out the hypocrisy of the audience, really, like humanity. But in a good Bouffon show, you should laugh, 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 laugh. Oh, ow, that's me. I give an acknowledgement to country, but don't do anything beyond that. Ow, that's me. Or whatever. I give money to charity, but only if somebody's watching. All these. I say that I care about the environment, but I don't recycle. Whereas the clown is like is being seen. The Bouffon sees all the things, and the clown is seen by the audience. And also the Bouffon is very knowing, whereas the clown is more naive. Jofus is in a grey area with this, because Jofus knows a little bit and is not so naive. And that would be my like pedagogical criticism of Jofus, is that there like there's almost not enough naivety for it to be considered pure red-nosed clown. I think there's just enough. Yeah, but that I think the clown also is this is what makes Jofus very much in the red-nosed clown as opposed to a Bouffon. The clown is very affected by the audience. So I don't know if you noticed when you saw my show, but if somebody laughs in the audience, I look at them.
100% noticed that. That was you mirrored the audience emotion, the vibe, everything that was happening in the space was mirrored in you so instantly. It was beautiful.
Yeah, and this is also where the play comes from. Like something happens, oh great, yes, we can be together, ha ha. Whereas where the Bouffon is more like they hear the laugh and they're like, oh yeah, you're in trouble.
That sounds like a more intimidating form of
really intimidating. Yeah, it's a wild day. It should feel dangerous to watch Bouffon, whereas you should feel worried, but when you're watching clown you're like, oh my god, wow. I want to even if they're a nightmare, even if they're like a little tyrant, there's still something, there's sentiment. They're full of sentiment.
I'm so fascinated by this distinction between being seen and the naive feeling, sentimental vibe of clown, and the more knowing, intimidating, aware, pointing out the hypocrisy, calling you out of Bouffon. And for you, performing both types, how does it feel for you as a performer when you're in one versus another?
I don't like performing Bouffon so much, to be honest. I mean, in the moment, it's ecstatic. Like it's a highly physically engaged form. You put your body in very dynamic shapes. It's quite grotesque physically, and it requires, there's like a resting state that's really charged. So that's ecstatic. Like it's really exciting to be there. But I think it feeds the worst in me. Like it feeds my cynicism, it feeds my anger, it feeds me seeing hypocrisy in the world, which of course is there, and maybe it's useful to see that sometimes. But I think that I come from a place that was like that, and that I've worked hard to not be like that in my personal life. And so being in the clown state pushes me more, or like guides me more towards what I see as being a more generous, gentle way for me to be in the world, having not always been a generous, gentle person necessarily.
I really like the descriptions that you like. I felt like I could visualize the emotions that you would feel in each of the states. And one of the things that really stood out to me when you were describing being in Bouffon mode is a heaviness, a weight, a responsibility of sorts, a carrying of something beyond your own experience. It's sort of like a carrying of things around you that are putting you in a position of having to take a stand in a not very like it doesn't feel friendly or light. It feels very, it feels like the kind of thing that you would need to recharge from afterwards, whereas clown almost feels like a self-replenishing state to be in. Is that how you experience it as well? Like, does it feel like being in that state recharges you just by being in that state?
Yeah. Particularly playing as, actually I was going to say particularly playing as Jofus, but that's not true. There are other clown characters that I have that I adore. Like, I love them as these individuals, these beautiful creatures that kind of I put on their shell and I get to play at them. Yeah, they make me really happy. I mean, you can see it just when I talk about it. They make me so happy. And Bouffon is like fire. It's like being all of the aspects of fire, and it is exhausting. My partner and my housemate are in a company that makes Bouffon work, and they'll have a show early next year at La Mama called Us Two, We Two, Two Two, Me Two, something like this, which is it's about toxic masculinity and where that can lead, and so it's important subject matter, and it's dark subject matter, and it's a very funny show from the stuff that I've seen. But when they come home from rehearsals, my God, they are hard to be around because they're charged up, you know, they're full of this like crazy energy. And I'm like, oh, I'm not on the same level. It's like if someone's on drugs and you're totally sober.
Yeah.
Their state of being has literally been transformed. Yeah, and it's not a frequency that makes me feel so good to be in, I think.
Yeah, it's such an important point, because you're right. When different people are experiencing a different reality because of, you know, what they're either feeding themselves through what they're performing, or, you know, literal drugs or whatever, it is a different wavelength, it is a different frequency, and it is difficult to be in the same space without experiencing the same thing. And I can imagine how exhausting it must be for them, but also then for you to absorb that secondary exhaustion.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, we have a thing as humans where we like to merge with each other's rhythm, and this is a thing that you see in clown workshops a lot as well, right? Because clowns all have their own rhythm and their own way of being, which, you know, if you do the type of clown work that I do, it comes from your own rhythm. So like my rhythm's very fast, maybe your rhythm is something else, someone else will have a very slow rhythm. But when you see two clowns walk together, they want to have the same rhythm. And so something that you learn is to not merge, don't, you know, to maintain. But the Bouffon, they're not soloists, so like they move as a chorus, and they propel each other up on this rhythm. So hopefully when they do their next development and they're coming home, I can hold tight to my clown rhythm and not merge, and they can spin and it will all be fine.
That's such a fascinating idea of not merging and holding on to your own rhythm. And Lily, I had so many questions that I was going to ask about so many different things, but I really want to just actually end on this one because I feel like this is such a high point for people to really reflect on because, even outside of clowning, that's something that we come across all the time with the people around us, wanting to instinctively merge because instinctively, yeah, we do tend to pick up what's around us, and that's pretty much empathy 101 and stuff like that. But how do you do that thing of not merging? How do you hold on to your rhythm? What's your self-talk? What do you tell yourself? How does that practically work?
First of all, I want to say there is a time to merge and there is a time to not merge. So if you are not on the same page with someone and you want to work it out, literally to go for a walk with them is going to be helpful. To walk together in the same rhythm is actually going to be helpful in conflict resolution. And like my company, my theatre company, we do a lot of training together, doing ensemble movement where we all do the same thing so that we're really connected, so we have good complicity with each other. But then of course there's the time to not merge as well. And like, I don't know how I implement that in my real life, but in my theatre performing practice, technique. It's always technique. If you know what you are doing, you will be fine, right? So when I go onto stage and I'm performing as Jofus, I know that my knees will be bent. I know that my rhythm will be this. I know my voice will be this. I know, like, there's all these things that I know. And so I just need to do those things and then I'll be fine. Know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then be present and observe. I'm doing this.
It's so simple and yet it's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything. It's literally like I can't think of anything in life that wouldn't be summarized by these two things. Know what you're doing, whether that's knowing yourself, whether that's knowing the situation you're in, knowing the structure, knowing the parameters, knowing the, like you said, technique, knowing what you're operating in within, knowing what you're operating with, like all of those things. And then if you don't know enough, observe till you do know, and observe till you figure it out. And that's fantastic, Lily. This has been such an enlightening chat for me. This has been so enriching. I've really loved hearing your perspective on so many things, and hearing about clown and Bouffon, and especially because I have not had any exposure, I think, to Bouffon. So it's been a really, really good learning experience for me. So thank you so much for sharing all of these beautiful things. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell people, whether about Knell or clowning or anything else, anything about you?
No, not at all. Thank you for having me. Yeah, go and see theatre. That's all that I have to say.
Absolutely, yeah, everyone go see theatre. And Lily, the next time you're on, I'm really looking forward to watching more of Jofus or more of anything else that you create. And thank you again for creating Death Knell. Thank you for this offering. Thank you for the space that you're holding for so many artists. And thank you for following that instinct, for observing what you felt called to do in this moment and for doing it. And yeah, personally grateful. So thank you again for this chat.